Good evening. This is the Lenin shipyard in Gdansk in Poland, the center of the strike that has rocked the communist world to its foundations. 3 weeks ago, TVI applied for official visas to come here. Those visas were refused by the Polish embassy in London. So instead, we came as tourists with amateur film equipment. We came because we wanted to meet and interview some of the people who dared to stand up to the party bosses of communist Poland. Tonight, this is their story.
In 17 days in Gdansk, this simple 51-year-old woman who works as a welder in the shipyard became a kind of saint to the striking workers, a reminder of their grievances, a symbol of their courage. Every day she walked to pay her respects at a memorial for the 27 shipyard workers killed by the police when the government crushed the first strike in 1970. Since then, Anna has fought a lonely battle for workers' rights, a battle that climaxed on the 7th of August when she was sacked and the workers went on strike in protest.
I don't feel so very important. I'm not the cause of all this. My case is just the last straw which broke the camel's back, and another person in my place could have been just the same, because there are many people who are oppressed. Maybe it's simply that they couldn't persevere, that they gave up, they bowed under the pressure. I just tried to keep my head high. I myself didn't expect what happened. When I was sacked, I thought there would be a strike, but I didn't think it would be on such a wide scale.
In spite of her frail appearance, Anna Walentynowicz has worked in the toughest areas of the shipyard for more than 30 years, first as a crane driver and later as a steel welder. She says she got involved in free trades unions because the workers had no one else to turn to. But from the first days of the movement, the pressure was on.
They attacked us with fines, wage cuts and even dismissal. It was like that for me, and I went through all the stages. This was an attempt to force people to leave the workers' movement.
There was no joy inside the Lenin shipyard. What there was a sudden intoxicating mixture of free speech and daring action.
I look at it this way. In the history of Poland since the war, there hasn't been an event like this. Whenever we are outside the gates of the shipyard, we feel threatened, even right now while the strike is on. But here, in this little piece of free Poland we have here, I feel quite safe. No one is telling me how I should speak or what I should do.
I was locked in a punishment centre for 10 days. Very few people know anything about these centres, as the radio and television in our country don't say anything about them. Officially, of course, there aren't any political prisoners here, but I can tell you that the conditions they are kept in are much worse than ordinary criminals. When my group was arrested, we were each kept in a cell measuring 8 feet by 3 feet, and everything like washing or going to the toilet had to be done in that space. When we tried a 4-day hunger strike, they forced us to eat by beating us black and blue until we gave in. 3 times a day we were interrogated to the point that we were completely, mentally and emotionally exhausted. Strangely enough, it turned out that one of the interrogators was a worker in the Gdansk shipyard. He's a stoker, but in reality he's a police lieutenant, and I can tell you there are many like him.
As Kazik told me, the Polish police did not let up during the latest strike in Gdansk. Strike militants were under constant pressure.
During this present strike, I managed to get home for a few hours. The police turned up and asked if I'd come to hand out strike leaflets. They had a look around to see if they could find any, but they couldn't, so they just noted down how much longer I would be at home. What it boils down to is that they try to keep a man on tenterhooks, make it so that he feels mentally defeated. Here in the yard, there are informers who have got in over the wall from outside. We are trying to throw them out because they make people afraid.
Kazik Sidorovich was one of the hard men of the strike. In spite of police warnings, he repeatedly packed his bag with illegal leaflets and slipped out of the yard to distribute them. On the day we filmed him, Kazik had devised a new method of distributing them. Walking across town, he joined the crowd at the railway station and boarded a train. As the train left Gdansk, he moved from carriage to carriage, passing leaflets to the astonished passengers.
I'm not afraid because I believe we are going to win in the end. No persecution or threats will make any difference, because if you have survived this much, then you can survive more. We just have to go on with this, because otherwise they will do what they did in 1970, when they came and shot us down and then carried the bodies into the forest to bury them. The government has been cheating us for just a bit too long, and nobody believes them anymore. Everyone knows we just have to win.
Many strikes have been broken by the fears and worries of the wives back home. But in Gdansk, it wasn't like that. Every day, hundreds of women came to give food and moral support to their men caged inside the shipyard. Behind that determination are the stark facts of Poland's economic breakdown. And in the countryside near Gdansk, we found more proof of the communist class system. Second homes, or dashers, being built beside a lake for Communist Party officials. Meanwhile, Kazik lives in a one-room flat with his wife and 3 children and earns the equivalent of £18 a week. It's these simple facts of economic breakdown that caused a wave of national sympathy for the strikes when they first broke out in Gdansk. Hundreds of other firms stopped work, and most sent delegates to observe and to help hammer out a clear platform of demands. The delegate hall became a hothouse, a democratic forum, a political talking shop, of a kind that most Poles had never dreamt of. Here, basic economic problems and government policies were dragged out into the open and debated. In the Poland of 1980, one of the few state organizations that really works is security. As tension mounted in Gdansk, police vehicles patrolled every major road, often passing at a rate of 1 a minute. Inside many of the vans are banks of electronic equipment, permitting the police to remain in radio contact with their informants on the street. The desire for democracy, for some kind of freedom of expression, was an inseparable part of the strike in Gdansk. As the confrontation with government escalated, the strike committee turned out its own news bulletins, which were fought over by the striking workers. The news that all had hoped for, but none had dared to expect, was the arrival of a Polish government delegation to negotiate with the workers. For these men, it must have been a novel, even a humiliating experience. Never before had a communist state been forced to recognize a workers' council independent of its own party system and then defend itself in front of it. Outside, the workers listened to the talks as they were broadcast over the shipyard's PA system, and they heard their leaders deliver a series of crushing attacks on the government's policies. Answering a call for moderation, one of them replied, "We don't want compromise. We want a hammer to smash the system and build a new one." But for the strike leaders, there was also the knowledge of the terrible risks they personally were running. The knowledge of how earlier strike leaders had been forced to leave the country or had died in mysterious circumstances. The strain showed clearly.
I don't believe that the party can interfere with our new unions because an enormous change has taken place. A complete transformation of the Polish nation, and they can't turn back the clock. This agreement has been signed by the Vice Premier, the representative of the government, and there is no way that he can go back on his word. But just in case they try to wriggle out of it, we've now got the guaranteed right to strike.
I asked Anna how much of a battle she thought the new unions would now face to establish themselves.
I believe things will develop peacefully because, you see, most of the workers I have spoken to are already resigning from the official government unions. They are handing back their cards, and elections to choose the leaders of the free trade unions are getting underway. Most of the leaders will be people from the existing strike committee. Nevertheless, it has all got to go through official channels. Once we've got a committee, there will be no problem with registration. Then we will be a legal union, and they won't be able to touch us.
I finally asked Anna if she thought that there was any danger that the Polish government would break its word.
I don't think so, but we have decided on a deadline of December the 16th. On that day, we're going to have a big celebration all along the Baltic coast. We're going to build a monument to commemorate the people who were killed by the police in the 1970 strike. And I can tell you that if by that day, December of this year, the government hasn't carried out all its promises, if even just one item is outstanding, we are going to have another strike like the one we have just had. It's not going to pay the government to try and cheat us.